We arrived at night, as I recall. The building where Saddam Hussein had his office had sandbags all around it because Baghdad is so close to the Iranian border. And they were at war with Iran, and they were being shelled from time to time. We would have a meeting with Saddam Hussein the next morning, and a time was set, and we went in, and there he was. A brutal dictator in his military fatigues with his pistol at his hip. Was just a preliminary step, and it became almost iconic. My shaking hands with this brutal dictator who later became known as the Butcher of Baghdad. He postured constantly and was presenting himself as the great leader, which dictators apparently do. They foster that and have school kids praise them, make sure that their image is everywhere, whether in a photograph or a statue, and cause people to bow and kowtow. And you know, if you see your picture everywhere long enough, and if you see enough statues, pretty soon you might even begin to believe that. He almost became a caricature of himself.
Okay, so that's the infamous Donald Rumsfeld, who I consider to be one of the main war criminals of the early 21st century. There's obviously lots and lots of time left for there to be more, and I'm sure there will be. But Rumsfeld is extremely good. He's just a slippery dude, and he's extremely good at getting away from taking responsibility for really anything, unless, of course, he wants to take responsibility for it, usually a victory of some kind. He's just a very slimy character. And to give you an idea of how slimy he is, Richard Nixon, who was considered to be, until the most recent president, one of the top slimes when it came to being a lying, cheating, genuinely dangerous person in office, who was literally pursued from office because of breaking laws and committing crimes, felt that Rumsfeld was too dirty. And he said at one point, I think he calls Rumsfeld a weasel, and because Rumsfeld, as a very young man, worked for Nixon in the early 70s. And Nixon says, at one point, I've heard a recording of Nixon saying, "Oh Christ, Rumsfeld, keep him away. Give him something to do. Make an ambassador. Send him away because he's too dirty to be around us. He's too dangerous," which is a fascinating thing to say. So this is the famous Donald Rumsfeld, and here he is shaking the hand, and he says, "It became iconic." It's like iconic. It's like, yeah. So the question that comes up in the context of 2003 when America invades Iraq is, what was Rumsfeld, who is one of the principal architects of the invasion of Iraq, what was Rumsfeld doing shaking this brutal dictator's hand, the Butcher of Baghdad? One of the things that I didn't talk about, but you'll see on this map that I've posted a couple of times, showing the border war, basically, which effectively is what it was. I mean, the troops just didn't get into the country at all. They sort of took these. It became very static war, which is a good thing. But is that you'll see these little strikes where Saddam used chemical weapons, and one of the things that Saddam didn't have any problem with was using poison gas, and he did gas his own people, and he also gassed the Kurds. And this is basically how people know how effective sarin is, one of the various nerve agents. And, I mean, it'll kill a town in a matter of minutes. These are extreme. So one of the things that the American, British, French soldiers were very concerned about in rolling into Iraq in the 1991 invasion was whether or not they would be gassed. And they were forced to wear MOP suits, as they're called, which is a full environmental suit. And in 120-degree heat in the desert, you can can you imagine? I guess I should say you can imagine, but really, I can't actually imagine. Really, I can't imagine functioning. I can't imagine being able to get up and walk, let alone walk with, say, a 30 or 50-pound pack. I can't do it. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't do it now. I couldn't have couldn't have done it then. So anyway, little piece about Rumsfeld here. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming, which I always promise. So, the United States has a history of supporting what are called friendly dictators. So let me give you a slide here of some of these people. Okay. So these, well, before I show you that, these are people who, that is, the United States sides with dictators or authoritarian governments. Not in the same way that, it's not that the president, like in this case, we've got Trump saying, he likes, who doesn't he like? Bolsonaro and Erdogan and Turkey and the idiot who's in Hungary and Putin. And, the various different basically authoritarian rulers, who are dictators or authoritarian or, use power. And so he likes strongmen, and he that is strongmen, capital S, capital M, not like men who are strong, but strongmen. This is men who are known politically to be, leaders who are known politically to be leaning towards fascism, basically. It bothers me that I cannot remember who is running Hungary. Orban. Viktor Orban, that's who it is. Duh, okay. Jeez. Okay. So as I say, it's not that that you've got a president who's sort of enamored of people who are like, I like the way you beat up on I like the way you swing your power around, your penis around. But it's that the whole government has a policy of supporting these people so that everybody's in on it. The State Department, the CIA, other security agencies, the main organs, basically, of government that make deals with these governments. So what are they going to be? So this has meant the United States, and sometimes Canada as well, has supported and helped into power dictators like, for instance, Augusto Pinochet in Chile, Maximiliano Martinez in El Salvador, Fulgencio Batista in Cuba, Eustacio Somoza Jr. and Sr. in Nicaragua, pardon me, General Efrain Rios Montt in Guatemala, now in 2015 facing serious war crimes trials and also suffering dementia. So it's like, don't bother, just put him in a room somewhere and wait for him to die. That's what's going to happen. And the list truly goes on for dozens of names, many in South America. The press has largely demonized Iran as an authoritarian theocracy, which is run by religious fanatics who, of course, are all crazy because they're not Christian, right? If they're Christian religious fanatics, we're like, oh, well, they're just evangelists or they're Baptists, Like, okay. And in 1991, they held up Iraq as a generally model secular democracy where the Sunni and Shia, these are different streams or arms, if you will, of Islam, and Kurds and Christians got along well. And it's true that under Saddam, despite the fact that he was running death squads and torture prisons and so on, there was tolerance in Saddam's Iraq that for the most part there was a great deal of getting along with. There weren't sort of ongoing civil wars breaking out in Iraq. It's like, no, there was some big cities like Baghdad were international cultural centers in that way, and they had the very high rates of education. Women were given educations. Women were allowed, I guess, to be educated is sort of one way of putting it. and women could got university degrees. They became doctors. They became scientists. They became engineers. They became computer scientists. They taught in universities. They taught school. I mean, there were all kinds of. It looked good. I mean, apart from just if you can just get over that bit of torture, and Saddam killing his own people, it was but it was a lot better as far as the West was concerned than Iran, which they just looked at and said that is no, that's off. So there was all this sort of, and again, remember the most important thing is that Saddam was like, free market? Yeah, I'm good with the free market. And the press sort of took it easy. They were like, yeah, we're not fond of Saddam, but at the same time, Saddam at the same time was seriously ill mentally. He was completely paranoid by the late 80s, there's for sure. He oppressed the Shia majority, which is one of these bizarre things. Same thing happening in Syria, right, where Assad is an Alawite, part of the Alawite minority, seriously oppressing the majority of Muslims in Syria. But so here's a Sunni Muslim, and one form of Islam or another doesn't make you bad. There's just these different forms. It's the same thing as Catholics and Protestants. It doesn't mean that one is good and one is bad. They're just different ways of understanding the word. And so here we've got the Sunni minority, which manages to get a leg up over the Shia majority, and just punishes them basically for being Shia. Okay, well, we've seen that before. It's just that the United States is like, yeah, we're all right with that. So let's talk about Islam for a second.